بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد سيد المرسلين وخاتم النبيين، وعلى آله وأصحابه الطيبين الطاهرين، ومن اتبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، ولا شبيه ولا مثيل له، ولا ضد ولا ند ولا جسد ولا صورة ولا أعضاء له. كان الله ولا مكان، فهو الآن على ما عليه كان. فلا تضربوا لله الأمثال، ولله المثل الأعلى. تنزه ربي عن الجلوس والقعود، وعن الحركة والسكون، وعن الاتصال والانفصال. لا يحل فيه شيء ولا ينحل منه شيء ولا يحل هو في شيء، لأنه ليس كمثله شيء. مهما تصورت بذلك فالله لا يشبه ذلك. ومن وصف الله بمعنى من معاني البشر فقد كفر. وأشهد أن سيدنا وعظيمنا وقائدنا وقرة أعيننا محمدا عبد الله ورسوله، ونبيه وصفيه وحبيبه وخليله، أرسله الله هدى ورحمة للعالمين، هاديا ومبشرا ونذيرا، وداعيا إلى الله بإذنه سراجا وهاجا وقمرا منيرا. اللهم صل وسلم وأعظم وأنعم وأكرم على هذا النبي الكريم، كلما ذكره الذاكرون وغفل عن ذكره الغافلون. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا حبيب الله. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا عظيم الجاه. I praise Allah, I glorify Him, and I thank Him for all the blessings that He gives without Him being obligated. And I ask Allah Ta'ala to raise the rank of our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and to protect the Muslim nation. I testify that no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah Ta'ala, the one without a partner, the one without an equal, the one without a similar, the one who is unlike anything in the universe, and nothing in the universe is like Him. He has no father, no mother, no sister, no brother, no son, and no daughter. He exists without time and place because He is the creator of time and place. He does not reside above the throne, and He is not attributed with fatigue, like the Jews say. Our Lord is glorified beyond any imperfection that the non-Muslims attribute to Him. Whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah Ta'ala is different from that. And whoever attributes and attributed the creation to Allah is outside of Islam. And I testify that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the son of Abdullah, the son of Abdul Muttalib, the son of Hashim, the son of Abdul Manaf, from the tribe of Quraysh, is the best creation of Allah and His final prophet and messenger sent to all humans and jinn, and He is truthful about everything He conveyed as a revelation. Thereafter, we remind ourselves to have the sincere intention for the sake of Allah in attending the session of Islamic knowledge, because having a sincere intention is a requirement to get the reward. So the Muslim, whenever he does a good deed, he has to have the sincere intention for the sake of Allah to get reward for that good deed. The reward is defined as the compensation that the Muslim receives in the hereafter for the good deeds that he did in this life among what makes him happy. An example of the reward that is guaranteed to the righteous Muslim in the grave is that his grave is expanded approximately 105 feet by 105 feet, and his grave is illuminated with a light similar to the light of the full moon, and the fragrance of paradise would be present in the grave. The sincere intention means for the Muslim to do the good deed, seeking the acceptance of Allah only, and not the praise of the people. So alhamdulillah that Allah Ta'ala has given us the ability and enabled us to do this good deed of acquiring the knowledge. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he described the sessions of knowledge as gardens of paradise. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam informed us in the Qudsi hadith that there are angels that search for the sessions of knowledge, and when they find them, they call each other to those sessions, and they fill up the session from the first earth to the first sky. And there are special mercy and blessings that descend upon the attendees. Also, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam informed us about the great reward that is associated to the sessions of knowledge. The great reward that is associated to the sessions of knowledge, which is evidenced by the hadith of Abu Dharr, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told Abu Dharr, يا أبا ذر لأن تغدو فتتعلم بابا من العلم خير لك من أن تصلي 1000 ركعة أي من النوافل. This means that the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام told Abu Dharr, "Oh Abu Dharr, if you go and you learn one chapter of the knowledge, this is better for you than praying 1000 optional rak'ahs of the perfect rak'ahs." So alhamdulillah that Allah Ta'ala has enabled us and granted us the ability to do this good deed. Seeing a lot of things about the sound. Is it better now for everyone? Oh yeah. Alhamdulillah. So we're going to continue on, inshallah. Last time we reached to the part where we talk about and we reiterate that Allah Ta'ala, He's the creator of everything. And this is crucial. This is a crucial thing to understand, because there used to exist, and as a group, as a faction, there used to exist a group of people called the Mu'tazila. And their name basically means those who were shunned, those who were cast aside, outcasts. And one of the things that they're famous for is that they claim that the slave creates his own deeds. They say that the human being, they're the one who creates their own deeds. And of course that's blasphemy, because no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah, because He's the only creator. He's the only one that has the power to create. So those Mu'tazila, because of their corrupt understanding and because of their incorrect way of looking at the religious texts, it led them to say that the human being is the creator of his own actions. And they did not limit that to the human being only. They said all the living beings, all the living creations, they create their own actions. So they, according to them, the angels create their own actions, the jinn create their own actions, the animals create their own actions, even insects. And they say that the human creates his own actions so that he would be accountable. That's how accountability would make sense to them. And we say that this is not conditional, this is not necessary for accountability. Because Allah Ta'ala, He does with His creations, or He does in His dominion, whatever He willed. We are all owned by Allah. We are all creations. And so it is impossible to attribute injustice to Allah. You can never say about Allah that He's unjust. So, since Allah is our creator and the creator of everything in this universe, that includes all dualities, it includes both good and evil, it includes health and sickness, it includes poverty and wealth, it includes beauty and ugliness, it includes all dualities. So Allah is the creator of our deeds, both good and evil. And Allah ordered us to do good and He forbade us from doing evil. And He willed for the evil to occur. And the human being will be accountable for the evil that he does on Judgment Day, even though Allah created it and willed for it to happen. Why is that? Because the human being, he did that evil by his own choice. He wasn't forced to do it like a robot. So he would be judged for his decision. The Mu'tazila, they don't understand this issue. And they claim that the human being creates his own actions because they claim, which is blasphemy as well, they claim that if God willed for us to do evil and then held us accountable for it, that He would be unjust. So we see their evil understanding and we see their grave mistake, because it is a basic part of the creed of the Muslim to believe and know that La ilaha illallah, no one is the creator except Allah. No one creates except Allah. So there's no room for anyone to say that the human being creates his own deed. And so here in this part of the book, there are proofs mentioned that are explicit, and there's a lot more proofs than that also. But explicit proofs mentioned that literally say that Allah created everything. So we're going to start from the bottom here. I'll put this highlight. Bismillah. The author said, Allah exists without a beginning and everything else exists with a beginning. He is the creator and everything else is a creation. Every creation that exists, be it among entities or deeds, from the fine dust to the ceiling of paradise, the arsh, and every movement, rest, intention, and thought of the slaves is created by Allah. Hence, no one other than Allah, be it nature or cause, creates anything. Things become existent by Allah's eternal will, power, and knowledge, as mentioned in the Quran. قال الله تعالى وخلق كل شيء. Surah Al-Furqan, Ayah 2 means Allah created everything. He raised all the creation from non-existence into existence. No one creates with this meaning of creating except Allah. قال الله تعالى هل من خالق غير الله. Surah Fatir, verse 3 means no one is the creator except Allah. An-Nasafi said, if a person hit glass with a stone and broke it, then the acts of hitting and breaking and the state of being broken were created by Allah. The slave only acquires the act. Allah is the only one who creates. قال الله تعالى لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت. Surah Al-Baqarah, Ayah 286 means every self will be rewarded by Allah for the good deeds it acquired and will be accountable for the sins it acquired. Now, these verses, for example, وَخَلَقَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ, it includes an all-inclusive term, which is kul. In this spot here, it means every. Yani, when that all-inclusive term is used, it's blanketing, it's generalizing, yani, without exempting any creation. وَخَلَقَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ, which means Allah Ta'ala created everything. And every creation that exists, Allah is the only creator of it. So this is, subhanallah, a very basic part of our creed that has to be understood. And why is that? Because that misguidance of those Mu'tazila, it still exists today. Not, for example, they don't exist as a group or as a faction, but that false claim and that blasphemous claim that the slave creates his own deeds. There are some people that are famous in the Arab world, and that they are looked at as sheikhs, and they're looked at as scholars, and they're looked at as Islamic figures or imams, and they spread that creed. They openly say it. They openly say that whoever believes, and what they say is blasphemy, of course. They said whoever believes that the deeds of the slave, both good and evil, that they happen by the will of Allah, that person is a blasphemer. So they say that about us. They say that if you say that Allah willed for everything to happen in this world, that you're a blasphemer. That person is his name is Ratib al-Nabulsi, Muhammad Ratib al-Nabulsi. But that creed is originally from the Mu'tazila, and he, I guess, is trying to revive it. So these are a few of the verses that would refute that. We reiterated, we explained, nature doesn't create, cause and effect don't create, the movement of the finger does not create the movement of the ring. So the only creator is Allah. Now, how about, so our deeds, then when the human being sins, what is that? How does that factor in? We say, even though we did not create our deeds, even though we are not the creators of our deeds, but still we're going to be judged for what we did because we did those deeds with our own voluntary will and decision and choice. So, for example, just like it's mentioned here, where An-Nasafi said if a person hits a glass with a stone and broke it, then the acts of hitting and breaking and the state of being broken were created by Allah. So all those things are created by Allah. You are created by Allah. Your body parts are created by Allah. Your thoughts are created by Allah. Your intentions are created by Allah. These functions, of course, they're created by Allah. Now, did Allah order you to move your hand towards the prohibition? Of course not. Instead, Allah ordered you to move your hand towards the good. Did Allah force you to move your hand towards the good? No. Allah did not force you to do what's right. You have the choice, not the entitled, for example, option to do wrong, but you have the choice in the sense that you are not a robot. You're not forced to do what is correct. So that decision that you took to extend your hand towards the prohibition, towards something haram, you acquire that deed. What does that mean? That means that your questioning on Judgment Day will be, for example, why did you do that? Why did you disobey Allah? Why didn't you fulfill the obligation? Why didn't you do what was right? For example, that's what the questioning will consist of. And basically, the human being, all that he can say, really, the oversimplified answer is, that was my inclination, that was my desire. And we're supposed to go against that. We're supposed to go against the inclination. We're supposed to go against the evil inclination and the evil desire, because we are ordered by our Creator and our Owner and our Lord to leave out that bad thing. So we have a moral obligation to do the right thing because we are not entitled to disobey our Creator. He's the one that has the right. He's the one that has the authority. He's the one who is the owner of these things. He's the owner of our hand, and he's the owner of that forbidden thing that exists. And he ordered and he decreed that you cannot do it, that you cannot touch it, that you cannot grab it, that you cannot have it. And so you have to obey that. So you would be wrong, and you would be at fault, and you would be blameworthy for disobeying that. So that's the accountability. That's what's called acquiring the deed. That's what's called acquiring the deed. That the human being, that he does his deed, he makes his choice, he moves his hand, he makes his decision, and he is going to be questioned about that. He's going to be judged. Did Allah order the human being to do evil? No. Did Allah force the human being to do good? No, he did not. We did those things by our choice. But of course, those choices of ours, they're created. Those decisions that we made, they're created. Allah willed for us to do those things. Allah willed for us to make those decisions. Yes, that's true, because Allah willed for everything to happen. And so how is that reconciled? And it's an easy reconciliation, really. Many people, they get stuck on this issue about destiny and the will of God, but it's very easy to understand. So when and we're going to talk more about the will when we talk about the attributes, but basically the will of God is an attribute of his reality, an eternal and everlasting attribute of God's reality, by which he specifies the mental possibilities with some of what is possible for them at a specific time over another. So what does that mean? That means, for example, and in accordance with his eternal knowledge. What does that mean? That means that God knew in eternity, without a beginning, that you were going to do this, and that you were going to do that. That you were going to choose, let's say, right instead of left, that you're going to choose up instead of down, that you're going to choose what was correct instead of what was incorrect. And so he willed for you to do what he knew you were going to do. That is the reconciliation, and that is very clear. And to delve beyond that, we're forbidden from delving beyond that. What we are allowed to mention and say is what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam informed us about, what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us. And he told us that the human being, he is created by Allah, and his actions are created by Allah, and what he did was willed by Allah, and Allah knew in eternity that this person would make those decisions, and that he would do this and he would do that. And so Allah willed for him to do what he knew he was going to do. So that is the reconciliation. Now, why is that important nowadays? Because there's many people, and you can feel the arrogance in them, and you can feel the entitlement that they have, and these non-Muslims, when they talk to a Muslim and they try to belittle the faith that a Muslim has, and they try to say, for example, why did God let bad things happening? They say, why did God let the children get sick and die? They say, why did God let such and such tragedy happen? And all of that speech objecting to Allah is blasphemy and sinful. So we see that they don't have the proper understanding to begin with about this issue, because it's as if they don't know that they're simply the creations of God. They're simply owned by God. They are God's property. They are property of God. And God does with his property whatever he wills. And God has the absolute authority. And he is not to be questioned. He is never questioned. And there's no authority over him. And he doesn't owe anybody anything. And there is no responsibility binding on him. And there's no one that's going to punish him or reward him. He is he has the absolute authority. He is the creator. And there's many verses in the Quran that they speak to that meaning. We're not these non-Muslims, because they think of God as a big giant old man sitting high in the sky, and they think of God as a father, like a father figure, like Santa Claus. This is how they think about God, the Christians. And so that's why they have this confusion. They have this confusion where they say, oh, because it's their belief, which is incorrect as well. The Christians, they say God is love. This is an explicit blasphemous statement, because number one, love is a creation. Number two, it's confirmed by the scholars of Islam that it is forbidden by consensus to name Allah a name that is, in Arabic they say jamid, basically means like, if you want to say a solid noun, like for example, man, tree, house. These are solid nouns in Arabic. So there's a rule that says that it is not permissible to call Allah by a name except if that name was revealed. And so this is the majority of the scholars, they said that. And there are some imams that have a valid opinion that they say you're allowed to use a name that is not revealed to call Allah by that name, with the condition that it has a befitting meaning, and with the condition that it's not jamid, with the condition that it's not solid noun. So, for example, you can't say God is love. You can't say God is mercy. You can't say God is the creating feather. You can't say that God is the managing mind, right? That's what Sayyid Qutb said. So this is blasphemy. You can't say God is a soul or a spirit, because these are, number one, these are creation. A feather is a creation. The love is a creation. Mercy is a creation. So you can't say that about Allah, and you can't claim to be using a metaphor. You can't say, oh, well, I don't mean it literally. Rather, I mean that God is the creator of love, for example. We cannot do that. As long as the person knows the meaning of those words in the English language, or whatever language that they're speaking, it would take them out of Islam to say something like that. Because they are attributing to Allah, basically saying that Allah is a creation. So the Christians, they think that God is love. They say that with their own mouths. And they think of God as a father figure. So when bad things happen, or when, for example, somebody murders another person, or when a baby is born with cancer and then they die a week later, or when there's an earthquake and thousands of people are crushed in a building, or there's a flood, or there's a hurricane, or there's an active shooter, right? These atheists, because they know what the Christians say about God, that they say God is the Father and that God is love. So the atheists, they say, why did God let this happen? Why does God let suffering occur? And we say, anything that occurs in this world, it occurs by God's will, number one. Number two, God is not questioned. He does whatever he wills. Number three, since God owns everything, then he is not unjust. No, none of that would mean that he is unjust. And if, for example, there was an earthquake, and let's say, women and children, they died in the earthquake. This would not be injustice. Um, this would not be grounds for attributing injustice to Allah. Why? Because everything is His. Why? Because He does with His creation whatever He wills. Why? Because He has no authority over him. Why? Because He doesn't owe anybody anything. Why? Because He's not obligated to do anything. And we mentioned that there are some verses in the Quran that speak to this. This is from Surah Al-Shams, if anybody out there knows it. The last couple of ayahs. فكذبوه فعقروها فدمدم عليهم ربهم بذنبهم فسواها ولا يخاف عقباها. So this is referring to the people of Thamud, those who Prophet Salih, he was sent to them. And long story short, there was a miracle that they asked for, they challenged, and he obviously rose to the challenge, and that miracle was manifested. And part of and that miracle was the she-camel that gave birth in front of them, etc. And that she-camel was amazing. It spoke the Arabic language. It used to say, Subhanallah, la ilaha illallah, Salih Rasulullah, in the Arabic tongue, because the Thamud was an Arab tribe. And that camel would give milk. It would deliver the milk to everyone in the community. And then after it would be done, it would sit outside the mosque, or it would sit saying tasbih and dhikr all night long. And whoever drank that milk, if they were sick, they would become cured. If they were poor, they would become wealthy. And it would be warm in the winter. That milk would be warm in the winter, and it would be cold in the summer. A lot of amazing things about the she-camel. And our master Salih, he warned them. He warned the people of Thamud. He told them, he said, don't come near this camel. Do not harm this camel. Do not get in its way. And there were some evil people that they decided to go against that. But you see there, how can someone blame the evil that men do on God? Just because God created it, they want to blame God? No, you cannot do that. Did God order those men to do that evil? No. Instead, Allah Ta'ala, He threatened those evildoers with a severe torture and punishment. So those people that were warned by Prophet Salih, they went against it, they belied him, they hated Islam, they blasphemed, they continued in their blasphemy, they doubled down on their blasphemy, and they slaughtered that she-camel. They slaughtered it. And it was a special she-camel, a miracle, a she-camel that came out of a solid boulder. And it had a physical description beyond anything that any of them had ever seen. And they slaughtered it. فَدَمْدَمَ عَلَيْهِمْ رَبُّهُمْ بِذَنْبِهِمْ فَسَوَّاهَا. And so Allah Ta'ala annihilated them. He annihilated the people of Thamud. He annihilated them. That's what that part of the ayah says. وَلَا يَخَافُ عُقُبَاهَا. And He does not fear any consequence. And Allah Ta'ala destroyed them, annihilated them. He does not fear any consequence. Nobody's going to come and say something. Nobody's going to come and do anything. Allah Ta'ala wiped them out of existence. And He does not fear the consequence of that. There is no consequence. And who's going to come and do something? Who's going to come and do anything? No one. No one's going to come and do anything. There's not going to be any backlash or retribution. No, it's going to be they're eliminated and that's it. Because Allah Ta'ala, He has the absolute superiority. So that's for the suffering, and that answers the question for the suffering that is not related to the sins of men. And in meaning that if there's an earthquake, and for example, it swallows up a whole town, right? It kills a whole city. Some people in that city are going to be Muslim, and some people are not. Some of those, and so the non-Muslims, the accountable non-Muslims, then they're going to go to hell forever. Yani, death came to them, and they had fallen short in embracing Islam, and they're going to go to hell. They're going to be tortured. The Muslims in that city that died, some of those Muslims were pious, so they're going to get the reward of living in piety, and if they died as pious Muslims, so what they get is paradise. Those moments that they spent, let's say, suffering, being crushed under a building or like dying in an earthquake, etc. Those moments are gone, and now they passed on to the afterlife as pious Muslims, and they get nothing but enjoyment and bliss. There's nothing unfair about that. And then those Muslims that were sinners, they got, death came to them before they repented, and that's why we're obligated to repent immediately from every sin, from any sin. Death came to them, and they're going to be judged and questioned for what they did. And either they're forgiven, and so they enter paradise without previous torture, or they're punished for the sin that they did, but then after that, they go to paradise until no end. And those moments that they suffered on earth, let's say dying in a catastrophe, are gone. So there's nothing unfair about that. See, these non-Muslims, these atheists, they say those things because they think that this is the only life there is. So this is all they got. This life, this existence is all they have. So that's why when their property gets destroyed, when there's an earthquake, they get so angry and upset because they spend so much of their life and time and energy on these things, and they wish that they could live forever in this world, but they can never, and they will never. There will never be any immortality in this world. Everyone that exists in this world will eventually die. Everyone that exists in this world will eventually leave it. So for the Muslim, this is a fact of the matter. This is something that for us, we're encouraged Islamically to work towards it, to prepare. But the non-Muslim, especially the atheists, they think that this life is all there is, and after you die, there's nothingness. That's why. So that covers a tragedy and things that are not related to the evil that men do, like an earthquake, or like let's say a baby being born with cancer, or a baby, let's say, dying a week after they're born, or like let's say a baby being abused and killed by by their parents. That baby didn't do anything to anyone. The baby is innocent, but still it suffered. But that suffering, for example, that happened in this world is temporary. And then in the afterlife, what that baby's going to get is paradise until no end. And so that suffering would be done and gone, and that he's get enjoyment until no end. There's nothing unfair about that. It's just that many people, they think with their emotions. And that is incorrect, obviously, thinking with your emotions. Rather, we're supposed to think with our objective minds. We're supposed to base things logically and obey our Creator, regardless of how we feel. Now, as for the injustice that is a result of the evil that men do, then this one's even more obvious and clear. Did anybody, for example, did God promise the evildoer that he's going to get rewarded for his evil, and so that's what encouraged him and made him do it? No, rather, all the prohibitions and all the orders were against that evildoer. All the orders were against that evildoer. He was not ordered to do evil. Rather, we are ordered to do good. And so the fact that he chose to do evil, that speaks to him, that speaks to that individual, to that evildoer himself. And that's why he'll be judged. So that's what when we say, and every self will be rewarded by Allah for the good deeds it acquired and will be accountable for the sins it acquired. And both are created by Allah. And the good deeds are created by Allah, the sins are created by Allah. The angels are created by Allah, the prophets are created by Allah, and Iblis was created by Allah. The pure and good things were created by Allah, and also the filthy, najas things were created by Allah. The good things, the pure things, the angels, the prophets, they have a high status. The devil is damned and cursed and has a low status. And the fact that Allah Ta'ala is the creator of both of them, that does not indicate, or that's not grounds for someone to attribute injustice to Allah. Rather, that is the complete, perfect justice and the complete, perfect power of Allah. Now we're going to move on to talk about another subject that also the Mu'tazila, they had the issue with. And it's also very easy to understand as well. The kalam of Allah is without a beginning, like all of his other attributes, because he, the exalted, is unlike all the creations in the self, that, attributes, and actions. So we say self or being or reality, referring to Allah Ta'ala. I like reality the most. So Allah is unlike all the creations in his reality. And the reality of Allah is Dhatullah. Dhatullah, the reality of Allah. And his attributes, Allah is unlike all the creations in the attributes and the actions. So our attributes, our actions, our realities, they're created by Allah. Allah Ta'ala, he's the creator of everything, and he himself is not created. Subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is greatly clear of all what the blasphemers say. So, and why is this an issue? Because some people erroneously think, and it's also blasphemous as well, speaking about the Wahhabis, they believe that Allah speaks Arabic. A'udhu billah. This is absurd, and it's also ugly blasphemy. It's also blasphemous. They believe that those words that we recite from the book of the Quran, they believe that those letters and sounds, they believe that that is the actual attribute of Allah. And this is absurd, because those letters and sounds that we recite in the book of the Quran, like when we recite, for example, Al-Fatiha, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. These are obvious, undoubted, definite sounds, letters, and they have a beginning, they have an end, they're segmented. They have to have also a sequence. You cannot say, for example, when you recite Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, you cannot, for example, say all the letters at the same time. First you have to say the ba, and then that has to end. Then you have to say the sin, and that has to end. Then you have to say the meme, and that has to end. Before you can say the whole thing, you can't say it all at once. So there's a succession, there's a sequence. This is obvious. We witness that with our senses. Therefore, it's definite knowledge. So we know that those sounds that we recite and those letters and the Arabic language and any other language, they're created. They're creations. Those are not the attribute of Allah. So this confusion is based on this Wahhabi, what the Wahhabi said. This confusion is based on their corrupt creed because they believe that Allah is like a human, that He has body parts, that He has organs, that He has a face, that He has two right hands, that He has one side, that He has one foot, or that He has one shin, 2 feet, that He has multiple eyes. That's what they believe. They believe that, even though they say there's no way that we can imagine this image, but they still confirm an image to Allah. Na'udhu billah. So among the things that they confirm, or among the things that they say as a result of that anthropomorphism that they have in their hearts, is that they claim that God speaks with a sound. They claim that God speaks with a letter and a language. And so this is obviously incorrect, it's invalid, it's blasphemy, because sounds, languages, they are creations. It's that simple. You can't um, you can't have cognitive dissonance when it comes to the creed. It has to, everything has to fit. The creed of Islam is corroborated by the sound mind. We don't make the basis of our belief the sound mind. But what we do is we use the sound mind to corroborate the validity of our creed, to support, using the mental proof to support the truthfulness of the creed, and to verify that the creed is true. Because Allah Ta'ala, He endowed the human beings with a mind so that they can apply its deduction, so that they can apply the results of using it. So that the human being can apply the results of using it. Allah Ta'ala did not endow us with a mind so that we can turn it off. Rather, in many verses of the Quran, it's mentioned about do you not ponder, do you not reflect, do you not look around the creations around you, the birds flying in the sky, the change between day and night, and this and that. This rhetoric is appealing to the mind. And the one who has the power to create all those things and make those systems and processes the way that they are is the same one who has the power to resurrect you after your body has decomposed and judge you for what you did. Because the Arabs during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they believed, many of them believed, just like the atheists of today, many of them believe that after you die, it's just nothingness, and that you just turn to dust in your grave, and that's it. And there's no afterlife, and there's no judgment day. Na'udhu billah. So we say that the kalam of Allah is an eternal and everlasting attribute that is not a sound, letter, or language, by which He orders, promises, and forbids. And He informs, orders, promises, and forbids. And inshallah, we'll talk more about that in detail when we get to that attribute. So the author said, summing up what has been mentioned before, it is affirmed that Allah Ta'ala has 13 attributes which were mentioned repeatedly in the Quran, either explicitly or implicitly. These are existence, al-wujud, oneness, al-wahdaniyya, eternity, al-qidam, that is al-azaliyya, everlastingness, al-baqa, non-neediness of others, al-qiyam bin-nafs, power, al-qudra, will, al-irada, knowledge, al-ilm, hearing, al-sama', sight, al-basar, life, al-hayah, and al-kalam. So basically, for al-kalam, I've not found the, I would say, perfect word. I've not found the perfect word to use in English to signify al-kalam, and that would give the exact meaning. The English language is very limited. So that's why I'm not using it. Because I want to find a better word. But basically, some people use that word speech, and they have the belief that it means something other than uh, speaking with language or with words, etc. So the kalam is an eternal and everlasting attribute of Allah that is not a sound letter or language. And non-resemblance to the creation and mukhalafatu lil hawadith. Since these attributes were mentioned many times in the Quran and Hadith, the scholars said knowing them is a personal obligation, fardu ain. So what does this mean? This means that these attributes, and we don't say that these are the only attributes of Allah. Rather, we say that these are the attributes that Allah Ta'ala has made incumbent. These are the attributes that Allah Ta'ala has made an obligation upon every accountable person to know. And these 13 attributes specifically, whoever denies them, whoever negates them, or whoever doubts about them, they exit from Islam, even if they never heard of it, even if they never knew about it, even if, let's say, they embraced Islam yesterday, and then after that, they doubted, does Allah have power over everything or not? Is Allah attributed with power or not? They exit from Islam. And we'll get into more details about that when we get to the chapter of apostasy, but that's why the importance of these 13 attributes. So we're going to give a brief explanation of each one. So the first one, al-wujud, existence, al-wujud. So this means that the existence of Allah is unlike our existence. Allah Ta'ala, His existence has no beginning. His existence is not preceded by non-existence. And proof from the Quran is there's many verses that prove that. Among them is Surah Ibrahim, Ayah 10. Afillahi shak, which means the existence of Allah is indubitable. Yani Allah exists without a doubt. Oneness, al-wahdaniyya, it means that Allah Ta'ala does not have a partner with Him in Godhood. Among the verses that prove this is Surah Al-Anbiya, verse 22. لو كان فيهما آلهة إلا الله لفسدتا. This means, had there been gods for the heaven and earth other than Allah, the heaven and earth would have been ruined. Eternity, al-qidam, that is al-azaliyah. It means that Allah Ta'ala, His existence is without a beginning. His existence was not preceded by non-existence. Everlastingness, al-baqa. Allah's existence does not have an end. He does not cease to exist. Allah revealed in Surah Al-Hadid, verse 3, هُوَ الْأَوَّلُ وَالْآخِرُ. This ayah means Allah is the one whose existence is without a beginning and without an end. Non-neediness of others, al-qiyam bin nafs. This means that Allah does not need anything and everything else needs Him. In Surah Al-Imran, Allah revealed, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَنِيٌّ عَنِ الْعَالَمِينَ, which means certainly Allah does not need any of the creations. And that means Allah does not need our obedience. He does not need our belief. And He is not harmed by our disobedience or by our sin or by the blasphemy of those that commit blasphemy. Power as qudra, Allah has power over all things. Allah is not powerless over anything. verse 109 of Surah Al-Baqarah, Inna Allah ala kulli shay'in qadir. This ayah means Allah has the perfect power over all things. Will al-irada, everything that Allah willed in eternity for it to exist must come into existence at the time which Allah willed for it to exist. Nothing will exist unless Allah willed for it to exist. Surah Al-Takwir, ayah 29. وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ رَبُّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Which means you do not will anything except by the will of Allah, the Lord of the universe. Knowledge, al-ilm, Allah knows everything, nothing is hidden from Him. Verse 75 of Surah Al-Anfal, Inna Allah bi kulli shay'in alim. Which means that Allah has the perfect knowledge of everything. Hearing, as-sama'. Allah hears all hearable things without an ear or any other instrument. No hearable thing is hidden from Him. Ayah 11 from Surah Al-Shura, وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ, yani a part of it. This means Allah is attributed with hearing and sight. Sight, al-basar, Allah sees all seeable things without the need of a pupil or a light. Nothing is hidden from Him. Life, al-hayah, Allah is attributed with an eternal and everlasting life, which is not similar to our life. The life of Allah does not have a beginning or an end, and is not a combination of body and soul. Of verse 255 of Al-Baqarah, Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum, means no one is God but Allah, the one who is attributed with life and is not in need of anything. Then Al-Kalam, the Kalam
We
of
can
Allah is
letting
an
people just
eternal
cut in
and
front of her.
everlasting
She
attribute
get mad. I ain't
of
waiting.
the self of Allah, and it is not a letter, sound, or language. Allah revealed in verse 164 of Surah An-Nisa, وَكَلَّمَ اللَّهُ مُوسَى تَكْلِيمًا, which means that Allah Ta'ala enabled Prophet Musa to hear his eternal and everlasting kalam, which is not a sound, letter, or language. And we'll talk more about that inshallah next class. And the last one that we're going to mention for today, non-resemblance of the creation. And it's evidenced by verse 11 of Surah Al-Shura, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ, which means nothing resembles Allah in any way whatsoever. And inshallah, we'll stop here. And next week, I want to select a few of the attributes to go in depth about some important issues. And then after that, inshallah, we'll begin explaining the meaning of Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Are there any questions? طيب نهلل لا إله إلا الله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات وبارك الله فيكم السلام عليكم. See you next week inshallah.